everyone, and welcome to Post-CEEBI interview, which are the final touch of a year full of activities and learning. This activity is done in collaboration with the University of Granada, and as all of you might have noticed, the interview will be carried on in English. So today we will meet Joanna Sadler, a researcher from Edinburgh University. Welcome, Dr. Sadler. It's an honor to have you here with us.
Hi, it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
So, Dr. Sadler, you are what I call a forward-looking scientist. You're a scientist who is searching for a solution to a near-future problem, the plastic pollution crisis. In fact, well, I would say it's more like a present problem, more than a future one. So, their life cycle isn't sustainable, and in addition, we don't really know how to deal with this problem. But your research is related to that. Could you explain us what is your research about and how could you contribute to this problem to solve this situation?
Absolutely. So, my research is very much motivated by trying to drive a more sustainable future, particularly in the context of plastic. So, if we think about the current life cycle of plastic, it's very, very linear. So plastic is currently made from chemicals which are derived from oil, so finite petrochemical resources which are running out. They are then made on vast scale and actually at very high environmental carbon cost as well. So a lot of carbon dioxide is produced in making plastics. They are often designed for single use. They get used once and then they get often either incinerated or sent to landfill. And to me, this is just crazy. I mean, this is such a waste of these finite chemicals, and it is not only contributing to climate change through incineration, but it's also, it's ending up in the oceans. It's in every terrestrial land environment we can think of. So it's causing a lot of problems. So my goal is to really intercept this life cycle and actually circularize it. So at the moment it's very linear, but I want to make it a circular life cycle so that the value of these materials is actually increased or retained throughout their life cycle. So to do this, I generate technologies which will degrade plastic and then upcycle the degradation products into higher value or useful molecules. And in particular, I like to focus on molecules which are otherwise produced directly from petrochemical fuels like oil. And in doing this, we not only tackle the plastic waste crisis, but we also have a way to sustainably make industrially important molecules from waste.
So, what do we use? What do you usually do about doing this kind of research? I mean, do you use microorganisms, bacteria, or what kind of microorganisms do you use?
We have done all of our research so far using E. coli, and this is because it's a very easy, as you may know, it's a very easy organism to genetically modify. So we are able to express non-native enzymes. We're able to do very interesting chemistry in E. coli that would be very difficult to do chemically without the help of nature. So we like E. coli. We are looking towards other strains in the future as well, but at the moment, most of our early stage proof of concept work has been done in E. coli.
And why do you think about or decide to produce vanilla instead of, because it's the substance what you are working, right? I mean,
that's right. So the first example that we have published around this work is upcycling PET, so polyethylene terephthalate, into the vanilla flavoring called vanillin. And this was done enzymatically using a wholesale biocatalyst. We actually pre-processed the PET plastic bottle a little bit and then fed that into these engineered cells, which could then produce vanillin. And the nice thing about this is vanillin currently is actually mostly made from oil. So there's a global demand of about 20,000 tons every single year. And that simply cannot be matched by what is available from the natural resources, so from extracting it out of vanilla plants. And so about 85% of commercially available vanillin is actually produced from oil, something that people are actually quite shocked by sometimes. And so this technology really gives a more sustainable alternative to that chemical method.
Of course. And you have talked about pre-treatment or pre-process of plastic, right? What is this about?
That's a great question. So a big challenge at the moment in the field of plastic degradation is the fact that a lot of plastic, and in particular PET. So the type of PET that's used in plastic bottles and food packaging is actually quite has quite a high degree of crystallinity, which means that the polymer chains within the plastic structure are quite highly ordered and they're quite closely packed together. And so it's very difficult for enzymes to come in and actually hydrolyze that chain and to start degrading it. So to do this, one way you can get around this problem is by heating the plastic up very rapidly so that those chains become amorphous and disorganized, and then you cool it down very rapidly so that the plastic sets in this amorphous structure. And this decreases the degree of crystallinity and makes it easier for enzymes to come in and attack it and actually start depolymerizing and breaking down that chain.
So I suppose that this is a solution that we could be taking into account in order to remove that huge amount of plastic that we have in our different environments, right? So am I right if I say that this could be a way to make the plastic life sustainable, right? This is the objective of this research.
In part, yes. So I see this as a technology to deal with the plastic waste that we have already generated. So there are millions and millions of tons of plastic waste already in existence, which are currently in landfill sites, so in the oceans, they're in our recycling bins. This plastic has already been generated and we need to do something with it that's not just burning it or burying it. So I see this as a solution for that problem. I think moving forward, though, there is a move towards changing the life cycle of plastics completely so that we're no longer relying on those finite petrochemical resources and making fresh virgin polymer from oil, but instead we're actually breaking down the plastic that we've used and using those degradation products to make fresh plastic. So you're breaking the loop in terms you're breaking the reliance on that petrochemical feedstock. There is also a move towards using bioplastics, so using feedstocks from renewable resources rather than from petrochemicals.
Yes. So what is required to produce vanilla in this case? That is what you are the first substance. I mean, which culture medium is needed or other condition? Because I think that we don't really can't use all the plastic that are in the ocean and just change into vanilla. I mean, there's something that we need
Yeah, there's
more
a bit of
than just
magic in there as
plastic.
well. So the first thing that you need is the engineered bacteria. So what we did was we took the genes for the enzymes which would convert the terephthalic acid from PET degradation into vanillin, and we expressed those in E. coli. So we then used that E. coli as a biocatalyst, so just something we put into the reaction, it would do the conversion. We also added in some buffer, so just a sort of minimal buffer for the E. coli. And the other crucial ingredient was something to permeabilize the cell membranes. So a problem that we had was how to get the terephthalic acid actually into the cells so that chemistry can happen. And we found a way to do this was to add N-butanol, which is a small organic molecule, which is found to permeabilize the cell membranes to these small molecules. So we also added that into the buffer as well. But other than that, it was a very simple system, and it worked at room temperature, so we didn't even have to heat it up.
Oh, okay. So that's all right. Um, okay. Therefore, we have to be sincere that in order to use the type of method, we need the industry. So, do you think that industry will focus on this type of methods? I mean, do you think that industry will implement this type of method recycling instead of producing brand new?
But yes, absolutely. So a lot of industries that we've been in contact with are under a lot of pressure, both internally and externally, to improve their sustainability profile. And so they have a lot of incentive to start engaging with these new technologies and to putting them into practice. So we are actually working with a number of industrial partners who are seeking to improve the sustainability of their plastics life cycle. And we are working with one producer of vanillin in particular, who are interested in optimizing our current process and seeing whether it's scalable, and then looking at whether it is economically viable and competitive with the current vanillin production processes. So I think it's something that industry are very interested in, because they have recognized that they need to change their practices so that they can become more sustainable in the future.
Well, that's really surprised me because I was thinking that industry weren't totally interested in that. I think it's easy to continue doing what they have been doing for so many years. So that's really
No, I mean
surprising.
they have very stringent sustainability goals. So, for example, one company we're working with said they want to be carbon neutral by 2030, which is only 8 years away, which is,
Mhm.
it's a very difficult target to meet. So they are actually investing very heavily in working with academics and with biotechnology, small companies, to see whether they can bring in some of these new technologies to make their companies more sustainable and carbon neutral.
Okay, that's good. When did your interest in science start, Dr. Sadler?
So I've always loved science, actually. Apparently, my first ever sentence had because in it, and my father said that I was going to be a scientist because I like to rationalize things. But I'd say my interest in becoming a scientist actually came quite late. So I went to university to study to study chemistry, and I still wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do at the end of it. And it wasn't until the third year of my undergraduate degree, when I worked in industry for 1 year, that I really it really changed the way that I thought about science, and I could see a very direct and a very real world application for doing research, and that really inspired me then to pursue my own career in scientific research. And I was always very driven by doing research to drive sustainability, and that's really at the core of everything that I'm doing. So having done my undergraduate degree, I wanted to then study the interface between academia and industry. So I actually did an industrial PhD with GlaxoSmithKline, and I was based in industry and only spent 3 months at a university. And again, it's fantastic to see how research can very directly impact real world processes. And from here, I learned a lot about biotechnology and biocatalysis, and I wanted to learn more. And so I continued my career in that field of biotechnology, and that's how I've ended up here.
Oh my God, that's interesting to inspire to hear you talking about that. Mm, I'm so curious about something. You are a Chancellor Fellow at the University of Edinburgh. What is this title about? What does it mean?
So, at the University of Edinburgh have a Chancellor's Fellowship scheme, which is basically an opportunity for early career scientists, so somebody who's been perhaps a postdoc for a few years, to start their own independent research lab and become a PI. Um, and you have 5 years to really get your lab off the ground and publish papers and do good at research and to do some teaching and to basically be a PI for 5 years. And the idea is that at the end of this, you'll become a permanent member of staff if you meet their requirements for that. So it's a fantastic opportunity to start your own laboratory. So now I have a team of 5 people, including myself. So we have 3 PhD students and a postdoc. So it's a great opportunity to start leading a team and really driving forwards your own research agenda.
So you have said that you were working in each industry and then you start working for the university, right? Am I right?
So I did a year in industry as part of my undergraduate degree, and that was as part of my degree. And then I went back to my university after that to finish studying. And I also did my PhD at industry in their building. So I was actually registered with the university, but instead of working at the university every day, I was working in the labs of industry every day. But the nice thing about that was I was actually on my own research projects, so I didn't have to work on their projects, but I got to use
So
the equipment. And then I came back into academia after all of that.
is there a big difference working in the lab from an industry or from the university? Is there a huge difference or
Yeah,
not?
I would say it depends very much on the company that you're working with, because industry is a very broad term, right, for a lot of different organizations. I was working with some like large multinational pharmaceutical companies, so it's a very, very big organization.
Mm.
And I think in that case, there is a much more focus on meeting company objectives rather than sort of following the science, as it were. So in academia, we have the liberty and the time to to really be led by the science. And if we find an interesting result on the side, we have time and the freedom to go and investigate that and pursue it. And it might be an interesting line of research, or it might lead to nothing. But in academia, in industry, sorry, you have to be very goal driven and just see the objective and go for the objective. And sometimes you don't have the opportunity or the time to really investigate those side avenues. But having said that, industry tend to have more funding often, so the facilities are excellent, and I found it to be a very collaborative and supportive environment. And there's a lot of interesting people working there who've got really interesting backgrounds. So it's scientifically still, equally stimulating and interesting, but it's just a different way of doing research, I would say.
Okay. So maybe at university, you're allowed to be more creative, maybe, because you don't have to search.
I would say industry is very creative as well, but creative to work towards a very specific goal in industry, whereas in academia, creative in that you have more freedom to work on something of your choice.
Okay. And which experience related to your science career has made the greatest impact on yourself?
So I would actually say it's my time working in industry during my undergraduate degree, because before this I was just thinking about science as something you learnt about in a lecture theatre, and it didn't really have a real world implication for me. Whereas when I went away to do that work in industry for 1 year, I could see how research was so important, and suddenly I was thinking about science as a real thing rather than a conceptual thing. And I came back thinking about science so differently, and it really set me up for the rest of my career. So I would really see that as a pivotal point, and I would recommend to everybody to do as much work experience as possible if you're wanting to have a career in science. I think it's a very crucial part of your training.
So we agree that work experience is extremely important, but what other skills, I'm talking about skills, is needed for a scientist?
So obviously there's the technical skills, and I think it's almost assumed now that people will have excellent technical skills. I also think that communication is an absolutely crucial skill in all of science. So whether you end up in academia or in industry, the ability to communicate your research not only to technical specialists, so other people in your field, but actually to people from all sorts of different backgrounds, so non-experts to younger generations. I think this is absolutely crucial, because if you can't communicate your research properly, then it's never going to be properly appreciated, and people aren't going to understand it so that they can then implement it in their own research, or just appreciate the science that's happening out there. So I would really say that communication is absolutely key. Written communication is also very important. And I think the ability to concisely convey information in papers and in articles is also crucial, so that people can really understand the value of what they're doing.
I completely agree. I mean that being able to communicate your results or your research, I mean it's essential in order to improve and in order to show all your results. Um, I also interested in something because we have different education. I mean, from Spain and United Kingdom. What is your point of view related to exchange programs or moving to another country in order to develop our knowledge as scientists?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question, and I don't think there is a right or wrong actually for this. I think it is very much dependent on the individual and that person's life and what that person wants to do with their life. So I personally have never moved abroad for studying. I have done all my studying in the UK. I've moved around within the UK and moved to different institutions, and I have enjoyed that because I have met a lot of different people. I've developed quite a wide network throughout the UK, and it's exposed me to a lot of different science through moving institutions, and it enables you to learn how to adapt to new situations well. However, I also know people who have stayed in the same institution for a very long time, and they're also, very, very successful. So from what I've seen in the UK, it's not necessary to move around. You don't have to do that if it's not something that you want to do and it doesn't fit in with your life. Yeah, I mean, you will grow and you will learn and develop if you move institutions, but you can also do very well from staying in the same place as well. And I think that's an important message to get across because not everybody can move their life to a different country every few years because some people have commitments. And I think it's important to say that you can do great things and you can have a very rewarding career if you want to stay in the same place as well. I think the most important thing to think about is that you don't get too comfortable in any one place. So even if you stay in the same institution for a long time, keep challenging yourself with new opportunities and with new challenges and things which are going to grow you as a scientist and as a professional as well, rather than just sitting in your comfort zone, because that's what would happen to you if you're moving institution. So you can replicate that in your own environment just by taking on new challenges as and when they turn up.
So, an advice for our future scientists would be to keep challenging, right?
Yeah,
Of
push
course.
yourself. Never sit comfortably in a space that you feel comfortable. I think it's healthy to keep challenging yourself with new things because it's interesting as well. Nobody wants to do the same thing over and over again. It's more fun
Of
to
course.
keep learning new stuff.
Of course, funny. And okay, I'm going to maybe to choose another topic. Women and science. Is there equality in human science, in women in science, or are we talking about maybe we have another things, more things to do in order to reach this equality between women and men in science? I'm talking
Yeah,
about the opportunity, of
yeah.
course.
So it's a topical question. I would say that there's no short answer, and I think perhaps different countries and different institutions will have a slightly different situation in terms of how this is going. I think across the board, there is still inequality. There's still a difference, and if you look at the numbers of people in different roles, that becomes immediately evident. I would say that we're definitely in the middle of a change. So I think that the inequality has very much been recognised, and a lot of institutions, Edinburgh University included, are taking steps to address this, which I think is really positive. So they're taking very positive steps to support people in underrepresented groups to try and address that. There's still work to be done, but it's in progress, and I think this is a really positive start. I think a big problem and something that I have struggled with over the years is that there's just mentality amongst junior researchers that it's not possible to have a family and also be an academic at the same time. And this is something that I have worried about over the years. Sleepless nights worrying about I don't know what to do because I want to have a family and I want to be a scientist, and I don't know if these two things are possible. And so I think I'm slightly stubborn, and I just said, well, I'm going to prove the system wrong, and I'm going to do it. So I do. I now have a 10-month-old baby, and it's very early days, but we're muddling through. It's possible. It's certainly not the easy option, and I'm very lucky to have a supportive family around me who are able to help out as well. Um, but it's possible, and I have a number of senior colleagues who have families as well, female academic colleagues who have families, and to me they were really important role models because they showed me that it's possible, and it's people to talk to about the challenges that it entails as well, and to help how to get around that. So yeah, it's a long answer to the question, but I think things are changing, and the more of us that stick at academia and show younger generations that it's possible and that we can do the things we want to do whilst having rewarding careers, the better, and that will also help to catalyze change in the future as well.
I totally agree. And I think we have the opportunities, we only have to use them. Um, what advice would you give to our future scientists related to whatever you want?
That's a very broad
About the
question.
future, about maybe the family, about all these crises or all mental crises that we have about the future. If we are, because for example, I am biochemistry, I'm so worried about the future, what I'm going to do and what I'm going to work in a few years. So maybe an advice for all these people who don't really know what they are going to do, but they all know, they do know what that they want to do something related to science?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think uncertainty over the future is difficult for everybody, arguably at any stage of their career. One thing that I have sort of come to realize, I think, is that there's rarely a right or wrong decision when it comes to your career. I think you might be in a situation where you've got different options available to you, and you spend a lot of time worrying about which is the right option to take. And I think often there isn't necessarily a right or wrong. I think you need to just decide on one based on some good reasons, and then just make the most of that opportunity. And as long as you make the most of every opportunity, more often than not, that thing that you've done will then lead to further opportunities down the line, and it will lead to something that's a rewarding career. So I think don't worry about doing the right or the wrong thing. Just choose a path and really, really make the most of it, and take every opportunity that's offered to you and excel in everything that you do as well, so that you stand out as being the best and you make yourself, you make yourself
Yes.
indispensable.
Okay. So I think that's the end of the interview. I hope everyone will enjoy that. So thank you very much, Joanna. Thank you very
Thanks very
much.
much for having me.
So goodbye. See you next week.